GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com. Hey, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you happen to be, or if you're in the future, whatever time it is. We are live again on a Tuesday morning for me to chat about content creation. Clover Tech and I get together on Tuesdays and we go live. The idea is to chat about this realm of creating content for the internet. We do it on YouTube, but we talk about all the different platforms that are out there. Clover's joining us from Texas. Thanks for jumping in.
Hey, good to be here.
We're going to be chatting today about funding your projects in 2023, some tips and strategies. We got a bunch of people joining us live, and more people will show up. I think we're starting a little bit late. That's my fault for trying to take a 90-minute nap. I was telling Clover about how I don't mind taking like a 3-hour nap or whatever, 3 hours sleep, I guess, but I just picked a dumb amount of time to try to fall asleep here. So I'm waking up slowly, and it's just a weird time with we get some numbers at 4 o'clock in the morning here. So if I want to stay up for those, then I'm up all night, I guess. So anyhow, getting into the show, we're going to see if people are dropping us any questions. We've got the some stuff that the robot came up with for this show, or for this topic, I guess I should say. And I guess I was going to start it out with when you think of, or when you hear the title, tips and strategies for funding your Second Amendment focused project in 2023, what comes to mind before we get into the whole robot thing? Or what the robot came up with?
I don't know. When I hear that, I think, honestly, I think more actionable stuff, like rather than like passive stuff. And I'm finding out more and more and more so that there's a lot of passive options out there rather than the actual active. So I think it's more and more and more so. It's gonna be interesting what the AI says on this for sure. I was wondering if you were gonna have stuff from the robot or not.
Yeah, we'll kind of use the robot as our structure for today. And this one, I had some trouble because it kept getting really verbose. So I ended up chopping it up so that it would fit into the 5,000 characters that we have in the YouTube description. I think when I think of funding projects in 2023, I'm thinking again of kind of what Clover was saying there about there's more than one strategy for sure. It's not something, in some ways there's always some element of having to explain what we're doing, but funding a project online is not anywhere near the same as it was in, let's say, what is this, 2023 and through 2013 or 2003 or in 1993. Technically in 93, I don't know, I guess technically there might have been something on the internet in 93, but it wasn't big. No one would have known what you were talking about, literally. It wasn't a thing yet. It was barely a sci-fi in the movies. By 2003, there was certainly an internet. It was on phones. It was getting faster, but it wasn't fast yet. Files for images would take a while. That was the days of people, the 90s and the early 2000s was the days of people with dial-up modems taking some amount of time, like actually 30 minutes sometimes, just to download pictures, let alone videos and stuff, was unheard of. So it didn't take long for us to get really comfortable with videos and everything else. So that's the easiest thing to think about, I think, is just videos on the internet and videos that come from television. And we had to wait around for a minute before videos were on the internet. Same kind of thing with funding. And, there was ways to fund things before the internet for sure. There was ways to apply some of those funding techniques to the internet when it was early. But then as the internet kind of became its own thing, there became ways to fund things on the internet that were specific and unique to the internet. I don't know if we'll get into all that or not, but then I guess I'm just trying to explain that, this stuff keeps constantly changing. And while there's new things out there. There's things that are still going to be useful, and there's things that have been useful that are going to have, seen better days. All right. So, if anybody's got any questions out there while we're live, again, that's part of the bonus or benefit of having a live conversation, is we can answer those as they come up. But getting into the description here, I guess, for some structure, the the robot came up with, I think, 5 or 4 pieces here: exploring different funding sources, crafting a compelling narrative, networking and partnerships, preparing a budget and funding proposal, compliance and legal considerations. Now, with that, having heard that now, in Clover's experience, uh, or time on the clock with all this, are those 5 things inclusive, or is that everything, or is there something missing that you noticed? Anything missing? He doesn't
Yeah.
understand how to mute.
No, I was on another tab because I was trying to open that up where I could read it. So
Oh, sorry. Here, I'll give it to you. Oh, you got a link. Is there a link to the top of the thing, to the video? I can put it in here
compliance.
anyway. So the ones are crafting a compelling narrative, networking and partnerships, preparing a budget and funding proposal, compliance and legal considerations.
Um,
So I guess that is 5.
Maybe. I mean, I guess that's not bad.
I feel like there's more to it. I think so exploring different funding sources, we can get into that. Crafting a compelling narrative, I'm assuming that means something like what you're going to talk about when you're actually talking to somebody who's interested, might be interested in funding your stuff. Networking and partnerships, that seems kind of like, figuring out what the lay of the land is, I guess. Preparing a budget and funding proposal seems questionable. There's a paragraph or 2 I could read about that, I guess. And then compliance and legal, but to me it seems like they're missing, what do you need? Like, how fun figuring out what your budget is. Like, what do you even need, or what could you use, kind of thing, instead of just getting
Yeah.
right into where and
Well,
how and what.
the compelling narrative to me seems more like a pitch, and that's more in line. The compelling narrative is more in line with the budget and the proposal, because you got to know what you're doing and roughly about what that's going to cost you to do, and then you've got to package that in a way, which is where the narrative comes in, that you can get that proposal out, that you can pitch that. Um, but I mean, for me, a lot of the networking and partnership thing almost needs to come first. Um, because otherwise, I mean, and this is an issue that I see with a lot of folks out there, a lot of creators that are they're their own little island, and they're not a part of the bigger community and everything else. And so that's the expansion of those contacts of your network. You're the sum total of everybody that you know, and everybody that they know, and everybody that they know, and so forth down the line. So the more that you expand that out, and then so you're when you're crafting things together, it's nice, talking about the first step there. When you're crafting things together, figuring out that budget, and working on that proposal for whatever the funding for whatever the project might be. It's it's nice to have some direction or some semblance, some inclination of, I'm going to be hitting up this company, this company, this company, or whatever the case may be, ahead of time, because I think that can influence, again, kind of how you craft things out, and how you set up, or tell that narrative, or push that narrative, or promote, maybe, that narrative.
Trying to set up a poll over here. So Right, getting into it, like I say, I think you need to know what you're doing. So if you're doing this as a hobby, if you're doing this with a goal in mind, if you're doing this as maybe to fund an organization or something, your funding can have an unlimited number. You know, you're allowed to have, I don't know what it's going to cost. You are allowed to have that as an option. But knowing that, you know, you can approach things differently than, again, if it's like a $200 budget or if it's a $2,000 budget or if it's something like that. Um, then there's, I think a lot of people, and let me know in your experience, I think a lot of
Yeah,
people start a project and then they figure out you can do funding. So they turn it on and then they go about doing whatever they were doing. And then, you know, it just becomes a second piece or whatever. And, you know, whatever, it's sort of like it is what it is. It's like turning on the radio. They're going to hear whatever song they're going to hear. They're not
yeah,
putting any effort into it, like maybe Pandora or something, where you can kind of at least tune the kind of radio you're going to listen to. I mean, the best they'll do is tune it to a station and then just get what they get. I think a lot of people turn on funding and then, I don't know, for whatever reason, they don't uh, tune it or they don't worry about it. They just kind of turn it on and see what happens when, and, you
yeah.
know, just like anything, if you had audio issues, you would
Well,
mess with them. You'd, you know, you'd get different microphones. If you had lighting issues, you'd try different lighting or different camera settings or something. So
yeah.
I think it seems to be something that people, uh, when you're
Well, a lot
creating
of people.
content, it's adjacent to creating content. So it's not one of the first things people think about. So, you know, it gets kind of put to the third or fourth level of attention.
Yeah. Well, as you're talking about that, I'm sitting here thinking that the robots today are worthless with like what they, because I kind of was looking that over, and we could almost take what the robots have written and just throw that out the window, quite honestly. Um, and the reason is there's just so many nuances dealing with money that the robots don't get it. They don't understand what money is. So, but yeah, I mean, you're right in that a lot of people will see how that other people, not how, but that other people are funded in some way or another. And all they see is the end result. They see that person going on a trip or able to build a, you know, new studio or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's a 2A thing at KD and the land and the facilities that he's been working on lately.
Greenwood.
That yeah, right, that sort of thing. And they see like the end result, right? And it's what I said earlier. There's a lot of funding streams that are passive, but that doesn't mean because they're passive that you don't have to put some work in. And so there's passive, there's semi-passive, and then there's, you know, I guess actionable. Um, you've got funding mechanisms where I mean you're constantly having to tweak and put in the work. You've got funding mechanisms where, you know, takes a little bit of work, but then um, you know, you're pretty much good. I mean, that's going to bring in revenue every week, every month, whatever. And then you've got those that are um, passive, but requires kind of like maybe working a garden or something. Um, so a lot of people, I guess, using that analogy or whatever of the garden, a lot of people will just fling seeds out in the yard, you know, and they expect something. They don't,
The
you know,
rain
they
will
don't.
water them, the sun will
Yeah,
keep them, whatever. The birds will
yeah.
stay away on their
Yeah,
own.
they don't worry about working the soil. They don't worry about, you know, fertilizers. They're not, you know, they're not setting things up in that fashion, in rows where later on it's easy to use their harvest, so forth and so on. If they don't have all that work in, and you know, can you yield fruits, so to speak, that
Yeah,
way? Yeah, it
can
can
a
work.
plant grow? Can it grow? Will it grow? Can you depend on it? Those are three different
Right.
questions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So you know, sometimes it requires that hands-on touch, that manicure to get the most out of it, you know. Um, so yeah, I mean, I it would be easier if it was broken down, I think, instead of because what this has done is it's broken the components of funding down. I see what the AI has done, but I think it's more beneficial for the real people out there listening to know that these are the types of funding mechanisms. You've got, you know, ultimately you've got active, semi-passive, and passive. And then within those, you have things that break down like fan funding, like, um, affiliate marketing, sponsorship deals, brand deals, as most would call things like that. So, um, yeah.
I threw a poll out there so the people that are joining us can chime in on how is your funding. I should have said, like, yeah, I think it works. How is your funding in 2023? Project is totally funded. Project is funded okay, but could be better. Project is, our funding is not there, or funding is needed. Just to get a gauge when we're talking to people, there's some people that are like, oh, pish tosh, money. I don't like to talk about it. It bothers me when people talk about money. It's low. Poor people talk about money. I've been told that before. Poor people talk about money. People with money don't talk about
One of the
money, and they
most
shouldn't talk
common
about
things,
money.
one of those most common topics rich people talk about is money. I hate to tell you.
Well, I don't know, but anyway, there's people
I do.
that'll. Well, I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
you're there. We're talking about funding projects, so there's people that'll look at these things as it's owed. We're on the internet; it's free. Therefore, the content on the internet should be free. Sure, there's content that's produced, and we look down on it, and it. We laugh at the amount of production cost or whatever effort there is. The best content is raw and free. And then there's the people that are attempting to build the fancy production stuff. There's people that are trying to do stuff frugally or cheap. I think there's a whole element of people that are um, not so much doing it just to be cheap or to be tongue in cheek or whatever the words are, but like literally trying to emulate, like, just people that are trying to show what they can do with the tech they have. So trying to create the same end result with whatever tools they have available. That can be pretty neat. In other words, doing some physical stuff to get the same kind of results as a special effect, a digital special effect. There's some people that play with that. Um, anyway, so there's different levels of cost and uh, what's the word? The production levels cost different things, and if somebody's just doing it frugally or on the cheap or no cost, then their need for funding is going to be different than somebody who's, I don't know, trying to emulate a travel channel to exotic destinations. Right at that point, funding becomes an issue because it's ultimately necessary for the whole project. So what we're doing with 2A, it can be super expensive. Now, I mean, there's everybody will conflate, I guess, or mix 2A and guns. And if you say pulling triggers is 2A content, which is debatable, um, that can cost money because a gun can cost money, range time can cost money, and then ammo costs a lot of money. Everything else involved, but I mean, I can tell you, you can definitely do gun stuff without spending any money because you don't have to shoot the things. But thinking about the levels of the funding, you're saying you didn't like the description of that the robot kind of threw out for this topic. And that could be me too, just accepting whatever direction the robot went in without challenging it or giving it a more specific direction or something. But how big a I don't know. I don't know what to ask you there. I'm just going to leave it there and see if you want to add anything. I think that's just I was just going to make a statement. I guess that funding is going to kind of depend on if it's a child doing a project, if it's a retired person doing a project, if it's
Yeah.
somebody doing a project for a business that's thriving or a business that's just starting or
Well, and
anything
it's,
in between all that.
yeah, and it's not just your current projects, but you've got to keep in mind, future goals and things like that too. So, um, I think folks, when in the context of YouTube, in the context of content creation or whatever, whether that's 2A, whether whatever it might be, they're um, the first thing that people think is, oh, I got to get monetized on YouTube, and it's it's I get why that is the case because they see that as a lot of people are doing that. It's easy to do, and the truth of the matter is Not a lot of people are doing that. 75% of the channels on YouTube are not monetized. Let me back up, more than 75% are not monetized. 75% of channels on YouTube are not to the monetization threshold, or not. Let me back up, because there's two monetization thresholds now, but the way it used to be anyway, 2 months ago, are not to the threshold. And there's some that are larger than 1,000 subs that could monetize that don't. So, um, less than 25% of channels on YouTube are monetized, whereas the perception is that all channels on YouTube must be monetized and making money. No, it's difficult. It's especially depending on the niche, and our niche, it's difficult to navigate. And one of the things when you talk about revenue generation, when you talk about funding mechanisms, is which ones are reliable and which ones are not. On the YouTube side, is um, really unreliable. I mean, you're at the mercy or the whims of multiple people thinking about multiple angles and multiple things. So um, while it is popular just because it's kind of in your face and there, um, there are major drawbacks to it, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's weird that it's the most popular. Now that said, it is
It's most
also
popular for you because you're YouTube centric, and we're talking to people on YouTube, and half of us think
right,
of YouTube
right.
first. But I think in the big
Well, this
scheme of
could
things, like
go
a
for
blogger is going to think of something else. Is all I'm saying.
yeah. Well, this could go for anything. This could also speak to those that do a podcast. There are podcast platforms that
Have a threshold, and then they pay
facilitate.
you.
They
Yeah.
facilitate their own ad spots and advertising and things like that, right? So, there are other platforms out there that would be the same as what I'm talking about. I'm just using YouTube as an example because it's the elephant in the room. Um, Now, one of the good things about that is if you're already creating content, right? Um, with very minor tweaks, usually, um, the talking about minor tweaks up front to make sure that your content is monetization compliant on whatever platform it might be. It's a fairly passive stream, so that's one of the good things about that dynamic. It's just important to realize, especially if you're new, especially if you're starting out. Don't think that monetization on YouTube is the norm because, or is the majority, because it's not, or in any platform for that matter.
Well, and I don't know if I don't disagree, but I'm also going to just say it a different way. I guess that you're not limited to it. So if you're going to wait around for that particular set of equations to pay
No, I
off,
agree.
or that
Yeah,
slot machine to pay off, then
no, I
you're
agree, and
wasting your time at the casino. Go ahead.
that's where I was going, and I think I got sidetracked on a tangent, but that's exactly where I was going. Um, a lot of people see that as, oh, that's the easiest, is the obvious. That's the first thing I need to do is get this channel or whatever, monetized, blah, blah, blah. And the fact is, you can be bringing in revenue. You can have funding mechanisms in place before you ever even have a YouTube channel or a
And
podcast or
everyone does
whatever it might
because
be.
no one is
Yeah.
funded through YouTube exclusively, especially in our realm.
Yep.
So that means that it's either their own wallet, their parents' wallet, or their employer's wallet, but somebody's coming along and paying for the time and effort they're putting into it, or they've got some other arrangement set up to pay for it or portions of it.
So one thing that might be neat to hammer down is sources, right? Take it, talk about funding sources for those that.
I
So
don't
you've
want to
got
get into too much anything. We got 11 people watching, only 4 people have voted, so I'm guessing we picked a pretty lame topic. So I don't necessarily want to assume too much. I was going to before we. I'm just going to cut you off because I don't want to get too far into
mhm,
detail if people ain't interested in this. So I figured I would chat with or hit on unapologetically arms actually out
yeah,
there making some
let's
comments.
do it.
So I mean, if somebody wants to hear about stuff like that, but if you know what I'm saying, like if because right now half of our votes or funding is needed, but half of the votes are funding is okay, and nobody's interested. You know what I mean? So if the funding's fine and this is a lame topic, we're just here to coach, not to
Yeah,
shove
but you
my
don't
thoughts
know.
in.
Here's the thing. and maybe this should have been said before the poll comes up. You don't know what you don't know. We found out about funding opportunities, did we not, G, yesterday, that I don't think we necessarily knew about beforehand, or at least some of us that was in that meeting, in that
Oh
room,
yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much
didn't know
how
about. So
with everything for
you
sure.
don't know what you don't know. So yeah, you may think your funding's okay, but I thought that at one time, and then I woke up late 22 and figured out, holy crap, it's money that is just sitting on a table. It's in a big pile in a room, like almost literally. And all I got to do is figure out a way, figure out how I'm gonna go get some of that money and stuff it in to carry it away. In other words, I need some mechanisms, some buckets to basically put that money in. I need that pitch, right? That the AI did generate. We talked about that, the pitch and the narrative. Like I need that stuff, right, to be able to propose to get that money. So there is an awakening that's going to happen, even if you think your funding's okay. There's an awakening you're eventually going to happen and realize, man, I thought I knew, but I did not know. I did not understand. I didn't grasp it because a lot of people can't, especially if you're getting just revenue things in dribs and drabs. And dribs and drabs may be that you've got a couple of big time sponsors and they pay for you to go, to the state capitol to rally. They cover your travel expenses there. They cover you to go to DC. They cover your range fees. They cover, whatever that might be. Um, but there's so much more. There's so much more out there that, um, yeah. I mean, I think you need to be paying attention to that. Now that said, I totally agree. If everybody thinks they're okay, or they think they need specialized treatment or something like that, I mean, we could always switch topics, or we could cut
Everybody
this
does. I
short.
mean, that's I agree with you.
You
That,
know,
or almost,
or we could
you're
cut
right.
this short and go into private session with some folks.
But I think you're right that most people are going to have a specific situation for them, and so we can talk generalities all day, but that's like talking generalities of what camera you want to use. Like, okay, well, here's a great camera to use, but now you want to do macro stuff, or you want to shove cameras down tunnels and pipes. Like, yeah, you're talking about a different camera. You want to have your camera up in the air in a drone. That's a different camera. So we can talk about generalities, but almost never do generalities work. Sometimes you can apply a generality to every project, but you're applying it. So anyhow, there's a couple of things I'll go off of, but to get kind of a different tangent, but a valid question that came up from unapologetic comment, more of a question from unapologetically armed. Just made myself learn Instagram Reels yesterday so I could share my journal fundraiser that she has going on with the DC project right now. Finally, have a phone that will do things. So now that you've got a phone, I guess giving yourself more probably an updated Instagram or ability to use Instagram a little bit easier. Um, I guess she's just letting us know that I don't know we were talking about there. Um, there's money on Instagram, so right, you can have a business account on platforms, you can have a regular account on platforms. Either way that you go, the size of your account is going to be attractive to people who either are interested in reaching your audience or are interested in you shouting things at your level of volume. And sometimes it's not your volume, but where you're able to shout things. If you're able to shout things to 25 people who are these customers, that's much more valuable than shouting things to 1,000 people who might be a customer, because it's going to cost a lot of money to shout it to 1,000 people. It's not even going to land. Sometimes the 25 people you talk to are exactly the 25 people somebody's needing to reach. Um, so, I don't know. Do you want to throw anything on learning Instagram Reels for the fundraiser? Which is, we could talk about fundraising.
I can't help with anything IG really to speak of. I don't work IG nearly as much as I probably should. I just my time's going into other places.
Yep, definitely. That's an issue, and that's something that applying this to funding, uh, Clover is probably aware of, but hasn't spent anywhere near the time that Gizzard or I have. And I've spent a fraction of the time Gizzard has, and I'm sure Gizzard doesn't spend all his time over there. But using TikTok, TikTok, a lot of people just again go, "Oh, TikTok, I don't use that one because if it's Chinese origins and they're spying on us or whatever they want to say," which is not disputing, but it's a massive platform and tons of people use it all the time to do all kinds of stuff, especially when we're talking about funding. The financial opportunities on TikTok are incredible. So knowing your audience, knowing your reach, and knowing who you are trying to get in front of, or being open minded about who you're getting in front of. Some people are like, "Oh, I nope, I don't like TikTok, therefore nobody on TikTok. I'm not interested in being associated with anybody on TikTok." Except you've never been on TikTok, so you have no idea who's on TikTok, and you don't know who what you just cut off. What number of people you might have just cut off there. And if we're trying to talk about Second Amendment specifically, we're talking about awareness and reach and uh, getting the word out. Um, similar kind of channels there. So I think there's some aspect that these platforms can make you money if you got a business account. You can do things with them. We're kind of alluding to that can be, essentially, what if you wear somebody's shirt, right? What if you wear somebody's hat in your Instagram thing? You're doing your little dance, but you're wearing somebody's shirt, wearing somebody's hat. You don't need some fancy dancing mechanism there. You don't need some kind of relationship with a company. Somebody can just say, "Hey, I'll give you $25 if you wear that hat." I think that's happening right now in Matt's chat, just as a joke or whatever. So there's things like that, and that's been going on forever. How long have people been wearing somebody's hat while they jumped off of someplace as a stunt, or like paint my name on the side of your truck when you drive it fast through town and make that jump or something? That kind of stuff. Is sponsorship has been going on probably since the beginning of time, I guess. Somebody wrote somebody and let me put my
Oh
hand
yeah,
stamp on your horse when you go do that crazy thing.
I
So
guarantee you
I'll
on
be
the
part of it.
side of the side of wagons and everything else, buildings, wagons, whatever. Yeah. Yep.
Um, so I don't know if we hit that or not. I think again, that's mostly a statement. We're trying to apply it here, but having a tool, a phone that can help you do things will open you up. Just being aware, opening up, reaching new people, seeing a new platform, seeing the application of a new platform, meeting a new chunk of an audience. I don't know. I can probably go on and on thinking about things that can open your eyes as a content creator to things that you just never knew were there. How often do you open a door and go, "Oh, I had no idea that a room could be set up like this." Just because you've seen a lot of rooms before doesn't mean you've seen every room, right? Like there's other things that are going on out there. So I guess that mindset of being open to change and evolution is not a required necessarily, but certainly a beneficial attribute to have. So if I go from this one to the next one, from Unapologetically Armed, took your advice and ponied up on getting to GRPC to expand your group. So I don't know, did I give you advice to go to GRPC? I probably did. Hopefully it didn't stretch you too much financially. I know you're already traveling a lot. Hopefully, though, it's an opportunity then to create some fundraising to have that paid for. I don't know if the DC project up or skill building and up training that they offer or make available, if any of that is focused on fundraising. But I think if somebody's listening to this and they're interested, able, or willing to take the challenge of helping to fundraise, the DC project representatives, the delegates, and the people who are part of it, doing things like what Susan's talking about, taking a trip to GRPC as a representative for the group in her state. So both for the DC project, but also for state of Missouri at the GRPC, which will happen in Phoenix at the end of September this year. Maybe not the most expensive trip to fly from. I'm assuming you're flying from Missouri to Phoenix, but at the same time, it ain't free. And they're insisting on doing it at a fancy airport motel this year because they don't care about money. So instead of doing it at some cheap motel on the fringe of Phoenix where they could be close to a range and next to the desert and let people stay for extra days because the financial burden wouldn't be so hard, they're doing it right in the center of town because they're not paying for their own bills. But that's my social commentary, I guess, my commentary on it. But yeah, I think that's an opportunity. You don't have to do it. Of course, I don't know how you're paying for it, but if anybody else is out there listening and you're thinking about what could I raise funds for? Well, you know, at least one lady that's going to GRPC, but I'll bet you there's a couple more. Um, or I don't know if it's early enough or if people are interested in the challenge, but uh, you know, potentially raising funds for any delegate that's going. I don't know if Clover's back yet. He walked away. So maybe he'll have some advice. He has different advice on GRPC than I do, probably. Um, Gizzard is saying I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket when it comes to funding sources. Explore the options for sure. And options change and things kind of increase in volume, decrease in volume. You know, they're popular, they're less popular. Something works for you. When I was traveling, you know, having the Patreon and the support of a bunch of people across the country was, I mean, financially made it possible, but the support, having that Patreon infrastructure, having this, I don't know what to call it, like the system that we had, you know, doing the live chats and having the posts on Patreon to keep people updated was very secure. Was that the right word? It was very comforting, I guess is the word, to know that there was pretty much somebody, you know, within a few hours of wherever I was, because, you know, we had that infrastructure. And I can imagine that would be, I mean, it made a night and day difference, you know, whether it was even worth doing the project or whatever. So funding sources can uh, surprise you too. Uh, what you think is a sure thing, you know, 2 days later, 3 weeks later, falls out from under or catches a sail and or a riptide or something and takes off. So you can't depend on them being lucrative. You can't depend on them failing, but you have to be okay. There he is. You have to be able to deal with it. I don't know if you saw. I kind of finished unapologetic. I'll go into the GRPC to expand her.
Nice.
So I don't know if you wanted to throw a comment in on that.
Yeah, that can be a great opportunity for that for sure.
Okay, so then we continue to get votes on the poll right now. Funding is okay, is the one winning. Funding is needed, only has 2 votes as far as I can tell. I guess funding isn't an issue. I talked to a bunch of independently wealthy people that if they want to do something online as a project, it just happens. And then there's 2 people out there that could use some funding. So more than happy to help you out with that if you have any specific questions. Gizzard put some advice out
Well,
here I was just blabbing about, but if you want to throw in on his thing up on the screen here.
well, funding. I mean, funding is not needed. Could simply be it's not like it could just be not needed because they're not doing anything that I mean they don't need to upgrade this or you know what I'm saying? Like what they're doing is low key, you know. And so in that sense, hey, I don't need funding. Like I don't want to grow. I don't want to pursue extra goals and expand, you know. And
Hmm.
so funding's not needed. I mean, it might not necessarily be a situation where it's I guess I don't want to say a bad thing, but yeah, like they're not saying they have plenty of money. I guess they're just in a space, and maybe they're not thinking about that. And that's one of the things to pick on the folks that says funding is not needed. You know, just a little bit. I mean, is it? Is it? I mean, sit
No, I
down and
think we're
ask
allowed
yourself. I
to.
mean,
I don't know if picking on them, but we're allowed to bring up that we're capitalists, and if we're not, if
yeah,
you're not comfortable, I'm pretty comfortable talking about money.
yeah.
Probably too comfortable because, like I say, I get told to whatever. You know, I talk about it too much, but we're capitalists. What the hell? We're supposed to be able to talk about money, and I mean, unless you expect Rockefellers to do everything for you, you need to have collaborations of regular people throwing money in a pile to get things done, and that's not charity at all. That's it's entrepreneurial and what's the word for when everybody invests in something? You know, it's that. It's the idea of speculation and you know the interest in seeing something exist out of nowhere. You know, waiting for a king or the church or some corporation to decide it for you is feudalism and monarchies and whatever the other thing is are, right? So I think getting comfortable with stuff. Now, when you were talking about maybe your project just doesn't have funding, I mean, what are you living in a vacuum? Like, I hear what you're saying, but if someone came up to me with that, I would my first reaction is, are you living in a vacuum? Because I know at least one person who's listening to this who just talked about having to travel across the country, who isn't independently wealthy and could help use help with funding. So again, when we're talking about some things which are as simple as, oh, I don't know, like the Cafe Patreon, setting up a membership on a YouTube channel, the things that are essentially subscription based digital entities where somebody just says, okay, and authorizes a couple of bucks of digital money to happen each month. That doesn't cost anything to set up. I mean, there's
Yeah.
minimal consequence as far as taxes and stuff. And if you set up a thing just like at a store, if they have a leave a penny jar, are you like, you're talking about money in front of me, and I don't like to have money talked about in front of me? Or do you go, oh, save a penny or whatever, leave a penny, and it goes to the MS or something? Like, okay, I'll leave my 5 cents, or I don't want to carry around change anyway. Here's 7 cents left over, right? Like great things happen when people leave their change behind, and
Mhm.
if you can essentially put one of those up on your whatever you're doing, like I guess you don't have to, but at the same time, doesn't cost you nothing to do it hardly, and it's
Yeah.
another skill set you can master or at least figure out. And then what happens when Massachusetts is getting wailed on, or state of Oregon is getting wailed on, or state of Wisconsin, what's it, let me keep saying Wisconsin when I mean Washington's getting wailed on, or fill in the blank, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. uh, if we all had the ability to put that tip jar out there and then throw those funding, do we have to wait for Midway USA to decide where to throw their tip jar? And that's, we all have to
Right.
watch them. So I think there's not an obligation, but there's certainly an opportunity for anybody who's a capitalist, understands capitalism, to get in the game, and to, if your channel isn't making money because you don't need it, then make money and give it to somebody. Make a big point about how you're giving, our channel, our crew, our family, whatever you call yourselves. We raised 35 bucks this month, and that went to the DC Project representative of our state. We raised 35 bucks this month. It went to 4-H. Get 35
Mhm.
bucks this month, and it went to some organization that makes tens of millions and only talks about lawsuits all the time. Whatever you want, you're free to do that, but you're free to not do it either. But I guess that's my rant about people
It's
that
true.
are, oh, we don't need to talk about this, or
Yeah, you don't
no
have
one
to use it
really
for
has to worry
yourself.
about it.
Yeah. 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 Um, the poll, I jumped over there just to look at the poll, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. 29% funding is needed, 57% funding is okay, but it could be better. And I really like the 57% there because that's folks that realize they don't know what they don't know. So um, I like that. That tells me there's some folks out there that do have the curiosity. Um, and that's awesome when you're talking about funding, when you're talking about those revenue streams. And I think honestly, I get why you titled this and build this as funding, but revenue streams to me is a more accurate representation. Um, for some reason, funding just doesn't have that. Um, Funding is almost like it's only for like a nonprofit,
Yeah, like
you know,
kids getting going to a
philanthropic.
football game, and are they funded for
Yeah,
their snacks or something?
yeah, like it's some type of grand philanthropic, endeavor or something. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like you said, we're capitalists, so you can make money, you know, talking about whatever you talk about on the internet. There's no reason that you can't, make money doing that if you're providing some type of value for a certain section, of the people. Um, people make a living doing all types of different things. Not to say that you could build up revenue streams to the point where you're able to sustain a living off of that, but you know, hopefully the goal with content creation, uh, in whatever form that takes. Again, whether it's 2A or whatever, hopefully you can. offset with revenue streams, with funding. You can offset some, most, and hopefully eventually all of that to where it's not a net loss for you.
And then I threw this up when you were chatting. I think I wanted to not interrupt you before,
Yeah.
but I'm going to bring it up now. And essentially, it's my rant about, this is an opportunity and a challenge. And so I think part of it is from when I was a kid. I always go back to when I was a kid and I had to, in Scouts, when we had to raise funds for whatever it is we were doing, like summer camp in the summer. We would raise funds for if we needed new equipment, to just tents and camping equipment stuff. We would do fundraising events. We would have like pancake breakfasts and spaghetti dinners, and we would buy flowers at one price and sell them at a different price. And learn about delivery and all that, and making orders and everything. So it was kind of structured, and the kids had to do it all, and it was a labor. We all hated it to some extent, and we would start out hating it. We would get into the competition side of it, and then it would be just a strategy challenge, to try to do better than each other throughout the month or whatever amount of time it was that we were raising funds. And then we get to the pancake breakfast side of it, and it was a blast because we completely forget about all the hard work, and then we just had all the people that we sold tickets to showing up to eat spaghetti or eat pancakes and stuff. And that was just the consequence of that effort, and the payoff was a whole level. And then we had funding, and we had new tents and stuff. So I've seen it work, and I've seen when you put in a little bit of effort going around to people and saying, hey, we're trying to do something like get tents for a scout troop. You might not care, but it's $5, it's $10, whatever. You just go up and talk to different people in different ways. That's just how it is. Like, what if it's politics? What if you needed to walk around and convince people that they're doing ruthless shit, with the sanitation department? Are you going to walk up and be like, sanitation department? Or are you going to walk up and be like, hey, this person needs to hear this about the sanitation department, and that person needs to hear that? It's just part of communication and being part of a community. Sometimes you have to be able to go knock on somebody's door. Sometimes you have to bring up money. So getting comfortable with that, I think it's not an obligation, but if people are going to just walk away from it and skirt away from it because it's rude, or they're scared of it, or they're poor, or they're rich, well, get uncomfortable. Like, you know what? We have people that are doing valid work that aren't independently wealthy and need funding. And if we want Bloombergs to support us, then get off your ass, Bloomberg, and support us. We don't have those. I don't think we need them. I think we're perfectly capable, and we're a much more um, difficult adversary for the other side if they can't go to a Bloomberg and squish them, like a pro-gun Bloomberg, and squish them, like, which they would eventually do if there was such a thing. It's really difficult to squish a bunch of people who are able to just raise funds when necessary. Think about the different world we would have if someone didn't have to think, well, if I wanted to do XYZ to contribute to this whole thing, I also have to pay for it. But if someone could just say, if I could do XYZ, we'd be better off. And they knew that they could do that trust fall into the community, and the community would fund them. The community would help get the word out. These are all related. Right now we're talking about funding, but we could be talking about, search engine effectiveness. We could be talking about, success on a YouTube platform or a social platform. These all have beneficial consequences where we get better at doing what we're doing. And we're talking about 2-8, not guns here. So that when something important happens, like what's happened in Massachusetts, Oregon, Washington, we're better at getting the word out. So I think there's some again, not obligation, but certainly opportunity when you chat about these topics for people who are creating content. It's not that difficult to add it to your skill set or your inventory, and it's creating an awareness with your audience and an ability with your audience that you're just leaving it on the table. An audience of 1,000 people who are willing to throw down $2 is $2,000 you could apply to the Second Amendment fight. And how often do you want to do that? Quarterly, monthly, right? I think weekly is excessive unless you're really doing good work. But do you want to add that, or have the ability to add that to your inventory? Like, how valuable is your contribution to the mix? Well, if you can throw $2,000 around, that's a total level of ability that. Well, I'm ranting again. So anyway, that's my angles and techniques and challenges. I don't know if you want to throw anything, but that's my kind of.
Yeah, I think that learning to buckle down, power through whatever is important when it comes to the challenges. And I'm speaking from some personal experience there, and then in what I've seen some other folks too. Too is they do some things, or they see certain revenue stream, a certain funding mechanism, and they start down that path of getting that set up, of working on that, and then it doesn't go seamlessly. Something throws a wrench into the works, and it's like, you know what? It's not worth it. Um, and oftentimes, especially if you don't come back and revisit it later on, sometimes you'll come back and revisit that later on. You will power through, and sometimes it's because of help and advice from other people. But you'll come back and you will power through, and then you'll kick yourself that you gave up in the first place, because you could have been riding that revenue stream this entire time, uh, and it wasn't as difficult as what you thought it was going to be. So don't let little things discourage you when you go through those revenue streams. If you're talking about sponsorships and different things like that, you're going to get told no a million times and for a million different reasons, and most of those reasons are valid. Well, the funding is not, the budget is not there for that company, or it's just the wrong time of the year for their budget, or maybe they just don't like your face. I mean, that could be a reason, but sometimes your mission doesn't align with their mission, and that happen. And that's, I gotta say, if you're talking about aligning with other companies or other entities, let's just say, um, that's another thing that's to be considered. Um, is does the ends necessarily justify that means? So, if you was to take, some type of company that has a bad reputation, or has a, um, maybe, what they do. I want to keep it fairly PG, but use your imagination on this. What they do is taboo in society, or whatever the case may be. It's frowned upon. You know, if they're willing to cut you a big, huge check to achieve your goals, is that a relationship, an agreement, a partnership, a sponsorship that you want to be associated with? You know, that's always something that complicates the mix a little bit, and you have to think about.
You're
Um,
beating around the bush there. You don't want to just say it, but I'll say it. We're never going to be sponsored by my 9 millimeter.
right, right. Well, what I was thinking is, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to come up with some, you know, who was the guy that got hammered with the Me Too movement? Let's say that dude decides, oh, he's going to go solid Pro 2A, and he's going to throw unapologetically armed, write a check for 10 grand. You know, do you really want to be funded by the dude that sleazed sleazed all around Hollywood? And what I mean is that, especially funding a woman and a women's, based in a women's organization, and I mean, that maybe that's not the best partnership. Maybe that's one that, you kind of bite your lip a little bit. It hurts, but you kind of politely pass on something like that. I don't know.
I guess I don't know the actual issue, but I understand what you're saying. And yeah, that's the kind of thing where you say, no, thank you, because of our principles or whatever. We're not
Right.
going to even consider it. However, we'll let the community, our audience, know that, hey, we just lost 10 grand because of our principles. And, often
Right.
again, that can create an opportunity for people to go, well, throw a hat out there and we'll all throw a buck in there. And
Heck yeah.
10,000 people later, and you're right back to where you started.
Yeah, well, that gets into transparency as well. And so, anytime you're doing things like that, transparency is it's definitely going to be beneficial to you. Because
We got a question.
we live in a day and age where pretty much anybody can find out anything. So it's much better just to be transparent, I think, than it is for, somebody to come along later on and make it appear as if you were trying to hide. You may not have been trying to hide something. You may just have not thought, well, no reason to put a big bulletin board of, billboard, I should say, uh, you know, out advertising this, like, to you it's not that big of a deal. But then somebody takes and they twist that or whatever to, try to cause trouble, which, I mean, it's the internet, right? There's drama and the squabbles and all of that gets clicks. We know that, unfortunately. And so you're going to have people that are going to do crap like that. And so oftentimes, if you can just, it's easier just to get out in front of stuff and just be transparent about it.
Gizzard brings up a point. I learned a lot about funding and revenue sources in the past few months. Lots of options out there if you're willing to put in a little work. Uh, Good statement, but I was also going to add in there that one, there are a ton of them, so uh, choosing the one that's the right fit or the right whatever, like goes in the same direction as whatever you're doing, that works with the people that are watching your stuff, that kind of thing, and then the number of, like, the quantity of them. Some of them are kind of compatible with each other, and you don't even realize that there's two or three layers here. It just seems like one break that happens in your live show, or one ad that shows up on a web page or something, but in reality, that ad is being shared by six, or that pause in the show gets rotated between a number of them or something. So there's ways that you can uh, accommodate uh, a number of things, but at the same time, we've all, maybe it's not so much anymore, but there must be some examples of it. Just the pages that are saturated with ads, or the uh, live stuff that's so uh, full of different ads type of, or different revenue generating stuff that it's hard to read the description. It's just so many links and ads, and then they keep pausing and doing on air stuff. There's product placement, and it just gets to be like a parody almost sometimes. So there's that. What's the word, like, level to get to, or to
Hmm.
maintain,
Yeah.
to figure out where is the appropriate level, maybe is my.
Yep.
And then none of them are simple. So some of them are pretty easy. YouTube memberships, I guess, as far as technically, you just apply for, you get to the piece, yeah, that one you have to get to some level before you can attain it, I guess. But assuming you're at that level and you turn it on, you can do things that make your members leave, I guess, or you could, not offer your members anything extra. There's things you could probably do to not incentivize it, but it's not like a very difficult thing to maintain other than have an interaction with the members. There's no technical elaborate procedure. It's not like changing oil on a giant piece of factory equipment that has to be done with a certain amount of time, or the machine fails. It's low maintenance. Some of them aren't, though, and I guess that's what I was saying, is that, while some of them are super easy, only a few of them are. Some of them are actually pretty difficult, and you have to put a lot of effort in learning into how the mechanism works, and then keeping it going. And there's always different levels, usually shitty levels of tech support or help, or involvement. The fundraising stuff out there seems to be pretty bare bones as far as technical sides and analytics and helps and FAQs. You kind of have to get used to muscling your way through, or teching your way through, figuring things out, and being able to deal with things that don't quite fit. So that's, I think I've seen people get frustrated when they're trying to apply some kind of a funding, like a banner ad, to a YouTube. It's just not going to fit. Like, you can try, and it's just never going to fit right, because it's supposed to fit on a website, or it's supposed to fit on some kind of a social post, but a link, a hyperlink, yeah, no problem. That can fit in a YouTube thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's no problem. Sometimes it can be super easy. So I don't know if I'm getting too much in the
Yeah.
Gizzard's thing. Where you getting on Gizzard's comment?
No, I agree. I mean, the thing is, with there's a lot of stuff out there. Again, I am, what is the word? Um, I'm
Bored?
knowledgeable enough to know that there's lots of things that I'm unaware of and I don't know, right? Like, I'm aware. Um, and so I think one of the things, you're right, is figuring out, okay, I'm already doing this. What's adjacent that can compound, right? And that lessens the amount of work involved with establishing those additional revenue streams. Um, and it was kind of what I was talking about before with the whole passive thing. People don't realize the amount of, you put things in motion, you can set things in play. Again, we're talking about funding, we're talking about revenue streams, and you can put certain things into play, and basically walk away from them. I mean, and that's been a thing. Let me back up for those that may be younger, for whatever the case may be, and don't understand this. Um, Residual, when I say passive income, I think that's a new thing. What that has historically been called, G, and curious as your perception, but through the '90s and 2000s, and me having a business and other things, I was involved in things that produced residual income. Is what it was basically called. Um,
Right.
that
Channels of residual income.
Yeah, and it's like you set those in motion, you set those up, you get those rolling, and it's perpetual. I mean, those things just,
In the
they
old
just
days, you would
you
come
make
up
money.
with a newsletter and photocopy it or whatever somewhere locally for those Kinkos. Some printing place would make it for you, and then you would put an ad in a newspaper and a magazine, and people would send you $1, and it would cost you a quarter, a dime, or whatever to make the thing, and then another nickel, a dime, whatever to send it. You'd make 50 cents sending them a newsletter. So it's essentially that mechanism digital and in the future, and now it's a newsletter that we're used to instead of a
Yeah,
piece
but
of
even that, you've got to put together a newsletter so often. What I'm thinking about is more like it's more akin to maybe
Oh, well, maybe like having
investing
a
in it,
bumper
maybe
sticker on your car,
investing
wrapping
into
your
a
car, and you got the arrangement. You put the bumper sticker on your car. Hey, I'm going to show up at all these races. I'm going to show up at all these weekend events. I'll put your bumper sticker for your hardware store on my car. You give me $25. It's done and over.
Well, I was thinking it's more of like an investment type situation where it's almost a one-time thing. You set something up, you put those wheels into motion, and then you make money off of it
Well, maybe I should have said
perpetually,
put the bumper sticker on. I get $25 a month until the arrangement's over.
or until the bumper sticker wears out, or till
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. As long as I own this vehicle, or whatever the case may be.
Honestly,
Yeah,
that's what a lot of it is. Like your website, your social platform, your project, your podcast is your car, and your bumper sticker is whatever it is you're coming up with, and they're paying you to have that bumper sticker on there. Right? It's
yeah.
product placement. It's hey, we appreciate where this car's going, or what this car's done, or what this car symbolizes, or the person that's driving it. We want to
Hmm.
be part of it, and we want you to know that. And the person who's driving it is going, hey, I can't do this alone. I'm here to get where I'm going. I'm here to build this car. I'm here to get the message out, and these are the people that are making it possible. Support them. That's what capitalism is. So that's what we're essentially talking about, except back in the day it was a car and you're driving around, or it was a newsletter and you had ads in it. Nowadays we're talking digital stuff,
Right.
versions of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you can actually still drive around. That's why I'd like to get back to where I'm driving around again. But so unapologetic, I don't know, did you have anything else with Gizzards is one there
No, I'm
with
good.
funding?
No, no, I'm good.
Okay, so then unapologetic arm said point of mentioning the reels is that she's putting things we talked about into action.
Yeah.
Right on. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
We can
Following up.
talk about things all day, every day. And we see that happen quite often where people talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But at the end of the day, until you create some action,
Is
until
it
you
a
actually do,
is it a
it's not
toss
going to work.
violation to have this guy's logo or whatever icon up here? What's going on? I don't see funding is not needed option. I see funding is not there, but I don't know what that means. Well, it means same thing. Like we don't have funding. So essentially, we are funded. Like you don't have to worry about it. Funding's okay, but could be better. Like yeah, well, we could use more money, but we're all right. Funding isn't there. Like there is none. Or like hey, we definitely need it. Because some people are just like hey, like Clover, I think was saying. Some people are like yeah, we don't need funding because we don't need funding. They're not desperate for it and they don't give a shit about it. It's just not they're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's what that one was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then funding is needed is somebody who's out there pouring money into their project, thinking that somehow if you build it, they will come, which sometimes works in the movies or whatever, but doesn't necessarily isn't a recipe for success. It's just a thing that if a bunch of people do it, sometimes somebody will find them. It doesn't mean it's a
Mhm.
I don't know what the word is. It's not a consequence. It's just a
Right.
It's not an inevitability either. So I don't know if that cleared that one up or not. And then he followed up with, and the last one is funding is needed. I don't, or maybe just said the same thing there. So I don't know. That was just a quick poll, just honestly, just to kind of test the pulse. Talking about funding, usually you get into people who don't want to hear about it for whatever reason, even though we're capitalists, they can't deal with it. People that, um, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll listen to it. And then people that are super interested in it, and I'm always skeptical. Those are the sus ones, right? Like the people that show up and the first thing they want to talk about is money and funding stuff. And, hey, welcome to the community. Let's talk about how this community is funded and where because we've seen a couple of people like that come in. And, well, guess what? They also pretty much booked right out too. But, you know what I mean? Like you can that does happen occasionally. But I think more often people just aren't it's not a thing that they think about when they're watching their shows that are funded. It's not brought up, right? A lot of times, if you're being sponsored by Coca-Cola, they don't want to make it obvious, right? They just want to subtly, you know, kind of allude to maybe it'd be nice to be drinking a Coke while you're watching this, right?
Right.
But anyway, we're an hour in. I don't know if anybody else is saying anything. Um, we didn't really use anything from the comment content or whatever the robot content here. Is there anything else to chat about?
Um,
Are we
I don't
missing
know.
anything? The
Nothing.
people that are out there watching, are we
Nothing.
missing any pieces? Do we just ramble too much in the right directions, the wrong directions?
Right.
The legal considerations, let's not forget about taxes. So, whatever you're doing, you might think of it as a hobby, but Uncle Biden ain't. So,
Right.
87,000 tax people. And that's something else when you're not doing any of this, oh, blah, 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 money. Yeah, yeah. Guess what? I got a tax burden no matter what. So I either got to cover that nut or, again, I have to be independently wealthy to start paying for just fucking existing, honestly. Especially, people don't even think about it when they start doing projects and stuff that, there can be, uh, well, you just don't get to write stuff off just because I think a lot of people think you just start to get writing stuff off.
Mm-hmm.
But without getting too much into that, yeah, you got, I don't know where you think compliance, understanding, oh, you know what, that might be. And we had to deal with this before the whole giveaways and raffles and that kind of thing. Uh, Sometimes people just jump right in and start doing some of that stuff without paying attention to state versus federal laws and jurisdictions and what's gambling and what isn't and what platforms consider gambling or not.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Um, all right, well, so nobody's saying anything, so it feels like it's a dead topic. Are we doing a chat after this?
Um, I'm gonna say no at this point.
Okay, not enough comments out there.
Yeah, I think so. And then plus, I got some things I need to do anyway. So.
Got to go spend all of this money that he got from funding all his projects.
Yep. Exactly right.
All right, well, so yeah, I feel like we're just chatting with each other. So I think a couple of people are out there now. They're trying to figure out what to type out there so that they can show up, in the comments that they're out there. But
Right.
we'll end this one with I don't know. What do you got coming up?
Um, Same thing I've been hollering forever. Gonna start with scheduling, funding, of course, scheduling and whatnot for I say the new, it's not the next podcast season, the late 23 season. In about a week, all the scheduling and other stuff will get kicked off with that. For those that are channel members, speaking of funding, channel members and Patreon patrons, um, those folks will kind of get updated as to, you know, who we're scheduling and some of that stuff before anybody else knows. So,
I lost my tab also. So right on. We'll be back on Saturday to ask on questions. Are you gonna be around on Saturday?
No, I'll be out of town again. Last weekend
So
and
you
this
know, Tony will be
weekend.
around on Saturday. Maybe actually no, maybe not because Tony's going to be at Rick's thing this week. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll do something else besides. I think I already put up an ask on question. So
Eh,
wiggle that one to the next week and then do something else this week on Saturday.
yeah. Right.
Um, but otherwise, yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. If you got a topic for next week in our coaching show, let us know and we can address that. If you've got specific questions, if you're one of the people that was looking for funding, I mean, we kind of just, I didn't want to like get too much into the details today, but there's a billion options right now.
Oh yeah.
It is a country of capitalists, and we're going into an election year. Uh, I mean, I guess it's your right to create content and not like make any funding on it or make any money on it. But going into an election year, just realize you're standing next to millionaires. You're standing next to people who are making 5 and 6 figures just by throwing a couple of layers on whatever the content they're doing is, or the effort they're putting out there. Um, you're allowed to participate in that.